Okay, Women's Prize winner announcement is about to happen. I have it pulled, the live stream pulled up on Twitter. Let's hear. Come on, Hamnet.
We can see you. Anyway, without further ado, this is the moment you've all been waiting for. Hold on to the edge of your laptops. We're about to announce the 25th Women's Prize for Fiction winner for 2020. And the winner is
Hamnet!
Maggie O'Farrell for Hamnet.
Oh, that's really exciting. That is exactly the one that I wanted to win.
Really extremely happy making news for me that you are the winner of the 25th Women's Prize for Fiction.
No!
Yes,
Oh
it's
my
true.
God! That's just amazing. Gosh, and especially because the shortlist was so extraordinary. It never occurred to me, actually. I feel like I want to run out.
This doesn't mean anything, but I really like the wallpaper in Maggie O'Farrell's home.
Definitely do that.
Okay. I am going to gather my Hamnet and some of the other finalists and move to the table, and we'll do this reaction video proper. Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to react to the Women's Prize for 2020. I have already tried to record this video once and I'm redoing it because I was so excited that I was basically incoherent. I was looking at it while I was editing. I was like, I can't even make sense of this. So we're doing this over. But the reason I'm very excited is that the book I had wanted to win became the winner. Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I'm really excited. This is the book I had been pulling for. I have read, I think, one of the other finalists, so that seems a little bit unfair, but it's just a book that I really love. This is one of my top 2 favorite reads of the year so far, at least. I think I don't know where it's going to lie, where it's going to end up in terms of being my favorite, or if it's going to be my second place finish for the reading year. There's also a little bit of time for something else to work in there, but I really enjoyed this book. If you're unfamiliar, Hamnet is the story of Shakespeare's son who was named Hamnet. History knows that Hamnet died, and in the years after his death, Shakespeare wrote some of his greatest and most tragic plays, including Hamlet, which took the name of his son. And this book explores the death of Hamnet and the impact on the family, but the most interesting thing that it does is it kind of removes William Shakespeare himself from the story. It doesn't entirely. He is a character in the book, but he is never named as William Shakespeare. You know that he is part of the Shakespeare family, you know that he is working in the theater in London, but you are very much in the framework of the family, especially his wife Agnes, who, by the way, is traditionally known as Anne Hathaway, but she is known as Agnes in Maggie O'Farrell's book because in researching there's another character named Anne, so in order to differentiate her from the other Anne, Maggie O'Farrell chose to use the name that was recorded on, I think it was her in Agnes's father's will or something like that. Names were a little more fluid, so she took that name. But anyway, so it's Agnes, and then their children, Judith, Susanna, and Hamnet himself. And because they are living in Stratford-upon-Avon, they are separated from London, they don't know the big city, they don't have any framework to understand what Shakespeare does. And I think that is one of the interesting things about it. You see that in his time in the small village where they lived, he is restless, and of course we know why, but Maggie O'Farrell gives room to you're always at a bit of a distance from him, so you understand what he is going to become and why he is restless, but they have no framework for it. So his whole life in London is kind of a mystery to them, and I think that's one of the most interesting things that it does. And in exploring the family, you get to look at Shakespeare in a different way. By removing him, you get to look at them and focus on their stories and their lives. And it feels like Maggie O'Farrell is kind of giving them their stories back, which is a really interesting thing and something that very much appeals to me. Again, when I talked about this a little more in depth, I said that it reminded me of The Five by Hallie Rubenhold from last year, where she looked at the lives of the victims of Jack the Ripper, but completely removed Jack the Ripper from the equation because she wanted to be able to talk about those women and their lives and not just them in the context of what a man did to them. And there are vibes of that here. Obviously, it's not as violent or aggressive, but it feels like giving them their story back. And there's something really beautiful about that. It feels like a book that is very much of the time in which it is set, but it also feels timeless in a lot of ways because the concerns that they have resonate about family and the place that people have within society and their group. That is still something we think about. Women have it still are working to improve their place. Agnes is treated as a witch and treated with suspicion by the people of the town because she has these senses about people and because she understands herbs and likes to walk out in the forest by herself, and she is independent and she does not adhere to the strict guidelines that society would like to place on her. It is a beautiful book. The language is wonderful. I am actually thinking that I want to reread this sometime soon by listening to the audio because I feel like this is a type of book where it would just feel great being told to you out loud as a story. And I'm really looking forward to that. So I'm very excited, in case you can't tell, that Hamnet was the winner. I just love this book, and I'm really looking forward to reading more books by Maggie O'Farrell. Really can't wait. And taking a quick look at some of the other shortlisted titles, I think it's easy to see why Dominicana ended up not winning. As I said in my predictions video, seems to be something of a love it or hate it book, and there are a lot of people who just don't like this book. And it has some staunch defenders, but it seems like that part gives it a little bit of a hard path to victory. I do think that Angie Cruz is an author who will benefit from being on the shortlist, so hopefully she will do fine there, and we can see more from her in the future. Very much looking forward to that. This is one of the books I have not gotten around to reading yet, but am very much looking forward to. It's easy to see why Girl, Woman, Other didn't win as well. But I think Girl, Woman, Other is a very different case from Dominicana because it is primarily, I would say, a victim of its own success. It co-won the Booker Prize last year with Margaret Atwood's book, The Testaments. And there could have been an argument where, because the spotlight had kind of unfairly been taken away, I think unfairly, I know a lot of other people do as well, but I'm sure there are people who would not say unfairly, but it had to share the spotlight. And the consensus was, for the most part, that Girl, Woman, Other should have been the one and only winner. So it could have been a chance to give it its moment in the spotlight just by itself, but it feels like in the time since it co-won the Booker, instead of fading into the background in favor of the more widely known and celebrated Margaret Atwood in The Testaments, Girl, Woman, Other has come out and really only strengthened its reputation. And Bernardine Evaristo has come out into the public eye in a really big way, and I think people are discovering her backlist, which is wonderful. This is one of the books that I had read. I will say, I think it has some flaws, but it's a wonderful book, and I'm very glad that it did win the Booker. I am one of the people who wishes it had been the only winner of the Booker last year, but I think it's a really great book, and I love the things that it does. I think if you took the Booker out of the equation completely and we're just going based on merit, I really love both books. I think Girl, Woman, Other is a more important book, but based on personal appeal alone, I would go with Hamnet. If there had been no Booker attachment to Girl, Woman, Other, I would actually probably have been happy to see it win just for the statement that it would be. But, it's technically, yes, book prizes are supposed to think about which is the best book, and that would be it. And for me, as a reader, I would say Hamnet is the better book, but Girl, Woman, Other to me is the more important book. But with the Booker, you can still go with Hamnet. So I am pleased by the way things worked out. Girl, Woman, Other still has a big prize to its name. Its reach has expanded exponentially. Bernardine Evaristo has become an author that people are really discovering and is getting out there, and that is a wonderful thing. Another book that I had not, so that's the other book that I had read. All of the other shortlisted books I had not read. Then, of course, there is the Juggernaut, The Mirror, and the Light. And kind of like Girl, Woman, Other, I think success is the thing that made it a difficult climb for The Mirror and the Light to work its way to victory in terms of the Women's Prize and in terms of the Booker, because this is still longlisted for the Booker. I believe the shortlist for the Booker Prize is going to be announced next week, so we'll see what Hilary Mantel's fate is in that regard. It's going to be very interesting. I do think The Mirror and the Light has a very good shot at getting on the shortlist. I don't know about its chances of winning a third Booker Prize for Hilary Mantel, which would be unprecedented, especially since her Booker Prizes, she's won two, came back to back seems misleading because it's not 1 year and then the next year. It's for the first two books in the series. So her back-to-back published books, not in calendar years. And it would be unprecedented for this to win another Booker Prize. We'll see. I think it's going to make the shortlist. I don't think it's going to win, but we'll see. But the very fact that we're talking about the Booker Prize and not the Women's Prize is, I think, why we're not talking about this as the winner of the Women's Prize, because it feels like Hamnet is a book that the Women's Prize can claim as its own and celebrate, and especially since it was not longlisted for the Booker Prize, which means, of course, it will not be shortlisted and it will not win the Booker Prize this year. This is a book that they could take and celebrate and champion on their own. And I'm very glad that it got that spotlight. So we'll see. Hilary Mantel is also an author who doesn't feel like she needs the lift that would come from, say, a Booker, but I've heard really great things about the book, and I'm really looking forward to getting to it. I'm hoping I will by the end of the year. But as good as people say it is, and as much as I'm looking forward to it, it's easy to see why it was not rewarded. And then of the others, some commenters on my predictions video defended 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. I'm not actually, strictly speaking, opposed to 1,000 Ships. It's just, for me, there have been a lot of classic myth retellings, and the ones that I have read, I have not really liked all that much. So there's more of a barrier for me in getting to 1,000 Ships. I'd still be interested in reading it someday. I think this is a book that benefits just from being on the shortlist, and that's a good thing as well. So that's good. And then there's Weather by Jenny Offill, which I think could have been the dark horse winner, especially since it seems like it's pretty clear that the three juggernauts in the race were Hamnet, The Mirror and the Light, and Girl, Woman, Other. But again, it's easy to see why Hamnet had more of a narrative, and it's weird to talk about narratives in terms of prizes, but those things like that do matter very much. And I think it's just, things like that are frustrating when the narrative supports something that maybe isn't the best, but I'm a huge fan of Hamnet. So I am happy that it won at the end of the day. And I'm really excited. I hope you are too. So I would love to hear your thoughts on the Women's Prize situation, and if you're happy with the winner, if you really wanted it to be one of the other books, let me know. Drop that in a comment down below. You know exactly what to do at this point. And I'm looking forward to the Women's Prize again next year. The Women's Prize is one of the prizes that I was not super familiar with when I joined BookTube, and I learned a lot about in my first year on BookTube, and I really enjoy it now. My heart kind of belongs to the Pulitzers. That's the one I'm doing the project about, where I want to read all of the winners. The Booker Prize is one that always jumped out to me, especially when I was working at Borders. It was one we really paid attention to. And I'm really glad I have another prize that I can kind of obsess over, because this is fun, and I'm really looking forward to doing it again next year. And I don't know if I'm going to do a prediction of the shortlist for the Booker Prize. So maybe I will. If I do, that's great. If not, I'd love to hear what you think are the chances that Hilary Mantel will win this year, and if she will make the shortlist. So if you have thoughts about that, leave it in the comment section down below, and let's talk about that. We can talk. And this is an exciting time of year because it's Book Prize season, and the Women's Prize should have been announced a while ago. They had to extend the timeline because of the pandemic. So it kind of it falls into that really exciting time when we have the Booker long list and now the short list, and usually Booker probably wouldn't even be a factor in the Women's Prize, but this year, because of everything going on in the world, it may have been. And that's kind of interesting. But now, so we have the Booker shortlist coming, the National Book Award long list is going to be coming soon, Nobel Prizes are going to be coming up fairly soon. So lots of exciting things going on. If you have thoughts about any of those, any of these books, or anything else, why not? Let's just put it all out there. By the way, it is cold where I live, and by cold I mean it's 48 degrees, but because we've had temperatures in the high 80s and low 90s, whew, it feels cold to me, which is why I am geared up for fall already. It's only early September. But anyway, as always, I really appreciate your time watching this video, especially if you have made it this far. And if you enjoyed this, I hope you would be willing to hit subscribe and follow along on whatever it is that I do here. Sometimes I'm not even sure. And if you are already subscribed, you are the best. And as always, I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.